Hey, it's Benjie Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Sue Golemon Whitaker. We'll be discussing her wonderful book, Seeds of Destruction, available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. And guys, I will say, Sue was brought to our line today by some of the best movers in the business. Okay, Parchment Global Publishing. Any writers out there, if you have a book that you'd like moved, give yourself the best gift you could possibly give. Contact Parchment Global to do just that for you. You can find out more information on them at parchmentglobalpublishing.com. Sue, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you so much for being a guest. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we're very much looking forward to this and really looking forward to learning about your history, your family's history, and just having another journey to embark upon, okay? Because we're absolutely looking forward to this. Now, Sue, I know we have so much information to cover, so let's just jump right in. First and foremost, why did you publish the book?
I wanted to share our travels, and I did it for my family, so they would remember then all the travels we had together, the good times and the bad times, and there were a lot of those. But mainly I wanted to tell my story about how I became a Christian and how, God is working in our lives. Miracles happened. I have so many of them in my book, and I just wanted to share those with the people out there and tell them that God is here and He's working for us if we're with Him, and pray and have faith. And that's what it's all about.
Sue, I know in part of the book you talk about your life in Germany. So let's take a second. Let's go there. Talk to our listening audience, Sue. What was life like in Frankfurt, Germany?
Well, when we first got there, we wanted to see everything, of course. So we traveled from one country around the area of Frankfurt, Germany, to other countries. And, that first year, we did a lot of work like that. When I had promised God that I was going to get into deep Bible study, I put it off until September when Bob made a trip to Saudi Arabia, where his job would be in the future. And while he was gone, I finally called into the church and got on the list, and I found they had 11 people signed up all year since school was out in the spring. And they had 12 workbooks ordered 12 workbooks. And they were waiting on me to show up, they said. And so we got into it. Frankfurt was great. We saw just about all of Europe from there until, the next phase of Bob's job was to go into Saudi Arabia. And I had never been hardly out of the country or even much in Europe. But it was quite a time to learn how they do things there. And what Bob was to do that first year was to rebuild. Well, not rebuild because they weren't already built. They had to build a road system and put in communications with radar sites and bring the country together, which had to be done just the proper way, building things that would mesh together and make a big internet of the whole Frankfurt area. They were shot at out in the deserts sometimes, some of the men. Now, Bob stayed there in Riyadh, and I stayed there, and I didn't venture out too much. But I did get into Bible study and finish up where we had gone into the book of Romans, and it was very good just to get into the Bible myself, and I didn't really know what Bob was doing until later. He came home between an assignment with Boeing for about 2.5 or 3 years, and then come to the States to go back to law school to take a break. between the assignments, and then he was hired by Boeing to go back. Lytton first and then Boeing to do similar projects to rebuild the country, but also this time was to build the Saudi Air Force and the bunkers underground, which were really deep. And underground, it was cool. Where up above the ground, it was over 100 degrees, 130 sometimes. And we family members were able to go down and see what they had done towards the end of the year when they had finished the bunkers underground. And then the Saudi Air Force had to learn to fly the planes. Of course, they were in training all this time to learn how to be pilots. And by the time they finished all the bunkers, I think 9/11 happened, and some of the land and the bunkers were used by the people that went over to fight that war. I know that I came home with the women and children first, and on the planes to get dependents out, and then the guys stayed over there, and they got out at the very last, a couple of months later, maybe several months later, I don't remember. But when the war started, everything went well, because we had an enemy out there that had to be conquered, and we had our forces in the desert, and they used some of the bunkers there that were built for the Saudi Air Force, but they also congregated around the area, around that area where Saddam Hussein had gone to hide. And when the war started, there was just so much done around that area. And we heard about it on the television. The war started one night around midnight, and Bob had already come home, and we had an apartment right across from the Pentagon where Bob had spent his Army years. Now he was not in the Army, but he had done the work to build the Air Force base for Saudi Arabia to defend that part of the world. And well, it was quite an ordeal, but we all managed. And, while he was home, he went back to law school and finished law school. And what came next? I think he went back. He was hired by the Saudi Air Force to be an attorney for the Saudi Air Force. And we went back over the third time to live in a better situation, beautiful homes that were built in a compound where we could have a more normal life rather than being, what we had before. So we just enjoyed being there, especially the third time, and then we came back home.
Sue, next question that I'd love to get into now. I know you talked about the Bible study that you ran. Now, how did the Bible study fit into your life?
Well, I promised God before we left the Army, because our children had been into so many bad things in the States, drugs and all sorts of things, the drinking that was going on around Washington, D.C., where we lived. And everybody seemed to be having trouble with kids. Our trip in the Army over to Morocco, where Bob was a foreign area specialist in the Middle East and North Africa, he was learning that there in Morocco. And that's where hashish was on the market. And I won't say all our children. Linda was too young. She didn't get into it. But the boys, especially Steve, our middle son, anyway, they got into this stuff. And then when they came home to the States, they knew where to seek it out and find more around the Washington area. So it was an ordeal that we had to overcome. That's why we decided to retire from the service and do something else so the kids could go to college, get their degrees. In Steve's case, who is called Greg in the book, Greg could go get to work. He had a good job before we left, and everything seemed to be going well for him. He had overcome the drugs a little bit. I'm not sure if he did go back, because if we were gone, we turned him over to God and himself so he could work his whole life out. We were just so tired of the whole thing. But we enjoyed being in Europe, and we enjoyed Saudi Arabia. And then after that, Bob came home to finish law school, and then he did not stay in the business of being an attorney because we were too old. But he did take a job in Egypt. That turned out to be one of our best projects. Bob was hired because of all his credentials. He was what they needed to finish the wastewater project to solve the water pollution problem that was around the Mediterranean Sea, around Alexandria, and it just was in the streets. It had been started several years before, and we learned all about Egypt, making trips up and down the Nile River and how they solved the problem of the Nile, gushing water all in the streets. And they actually detained the river in some kind of a dammed up occurrence where they dammed up the river and they made this big, beautiful dam for the water to flow over the dam out into the desert area in, what's the name of that country? Nubia, next door to Egypt, the Nubian desert, I think it was. But they had to move all the artifacts, the big, beautiful pagan things were in the desert, big buildings and statues and stuff like that were very impressive. But they had to cut it up, number the pieces, and put them back together on top of the mountains. And then when the water finally was released over the dam, it flooded hundreds of miles out into the desert. And some things you could see above the water, but we were flown to the far end to see the artifacts there, and then rowed a boat back up the river. It was not a ship; it was not that big. It was more like a boat, and we could, eat on board and enjoy the scenery. Get off at stops to tour places where they had underground tombs and things like that to see. They wanted us to take a tarantula in our hands, but I didn't want to do that. But the little Japanese lady that was with me did, and I couldn't believe it. But she would hold a tarantula in her hand, or whatever else they were trying to demonstrate there. And it was exciting, and there was so much to see around Egypt. And Egypt was a wonderful place. I had a wonderful friend there who was our landlady, who took me by the hand and led me through the streets. I mean, she was daring. She'd stop the car in the middle of a busy street and get out and fix her windshield wipers. She'd do all sorts of things and pull me through the traffic. I really love that lady, and I'm trying to write her now and send her some things. She gave me so many gifts over there. I still have them, like keychains and artifacts, that I could bring home with me.
Mm-hmm.
So that was great. I don't know what more to say except it's all in the book, and you can learn a whole lot more if you read that rather than listen to me. I probably leave out everything that's important because I can't remember it all.
I love it. I love it, Sue. Guys, you know what you have to do. Again, we're here on the line with Sue Golemon Whitaker, discussing her book, Seeds of Destruction, available for purchase through Amazon as well as barnesandnoble.com. You guys know what you have to do. As we start to tie out of this wonderful interview, Sue, question that I have for you. Now, there's a common term called the armchair traveler, right? Or sorts. I'm curious, does your book make your readers an armchair traveler?
Well, I hope it will. There's a lot to get out of it. I hope it isn't boring. I tried to cut a lot out. In fact, I had rewritten that book 6 times. And the 7th time is the one I'm ending with. Sometimes, you have to learn to write as you get started. And that was my problem. I'd never written before. I'd worked as a secretary for many years in the Washington area and other places. But I just had to learn how to do it, and I had to rewrite, and therefore the Army life got shorter and shorter and shorter because a lot of that was repetitious, and I tried to be more interesting and get into the travel mode. But also there are several chapters on Bible study to get deep into God's Word, and just learn to be near the Lord, and it changed my life going to the different churches and seeing the different modes of worship. And there's and to be a true believer, it's the Church of Philadelphia, the number 7 church. It has the open door into heaven, and that's where Jesus is the door of that church. And all of us in all the churches can be saved, but we have to go through the Church of Philadelphia to be saved forever. And I'm sure once saved, always saved. But people don't really learn that until they get into Bible study and really study God's Word, the truth. And He put it all in there. I had to sort of learn myself and add to it as I went by my own Bible study. So even today, I try to have time to study the Word. And it's a very exciting thing to do because God is real. I had so many miracles happen, and you'll see them in the book. One is a picture that I took of the first place I went to up in Kandersteg, Switzerland. It was a little church in the snow. It was after Christmas when we first went, and there were no people in it. But coming home from Egypt about 10 years later, we went back there to say goodbye to Kandersteg one more time before we came home, and we had a place reserved. But the next morning, after we came in the night before from the plane, we went to bed, got some sleep, woke up the next morning, opened the drapes. Right in the middle of those drapes was that little church. But it was Christmas time. A few days after Christmas, people were still there. They would go over there for 2 weeks at a time at Christmas. And they were in the snow, sleigh bells ringing, Christmas music, and little people out there playing snowman. It was just beautiful. And Bob and I went on the mountain again, and that's where he got that back picture of me on the back of the book that he didn't tell me what he was getting. I'm looking down at Kandersteg, and he said, "Stand right here while I get your picture." Well, after we got home and he developed that picture, there's a little red bench that matches my snowsuit in the back in the snow, and which just lights up the whole picture. Now, that was a miracle for God to have that place available for us at the busiest time of the year, right there in front of that church. There's just a bunch of things like that happened. I also have a picture of the island of Santorini, which was about 350,000 years ago. It was blown up in the middle into 3 islands, and we went through the caldera of that place on one of our trips out of Greece. All that's in the book, too. And that was a miracle, just being there and seeing the 3 islands that are left from one giant island that was made there right in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, the Aegean Sea. And it was so exciting to be on the plane coming in to Egypt, and the pilot said, "Now, if you'll get over to the left side of the plane and look out the window right behind the wing, you'll see the island of Santorini." I was right there in that seat with my camera, and I had no idea this was going to happen. I was on my way to Egypt. The windows were absolutely spotless, and the sun was at an angle that it lit up that island just beautifully. I got 2 pictures. After the wing, I snapped once and then twice, and then it was over. I had no more chance. But I got it in the book here. I only needed one of those pictures. They both came out really well. And I'm thrilled, just thrilled. That was a miracle. So God is full of miracles to help us, people who are faithful to Him. And I mean, if you need a miracle, he'll give you one. It's just a matter of faith, I think.
We've discussed a very small portion of the book. There is so much left to be discovered. I'm going to say it for you once more, even though I know I don't have to, but let's re-impress it once again. We're here on the line with Sue Golemon Whitaker. We just finished discussing her amazing book, Seeds of Destruction, available for purchase through Amazon as well as BarnesandNoble.com. Head on over there today, pick up your copies. A wonderful journey for you to take, but an even better gift for you to get for someone else. So head on over there, pick up your copies today. You surely will not be disappointed. Sue, this has been an absolute pleasure. Such an honor. Thank you once again for being a guest with us on People of Distinction.
Thank you for having me.